but we'll figure it out.
Okay.
I don't feel like you need to rush it.
Okay. Okay, page 11. So this is the same as yesterday's, Wednesday's, besides it doesn't tell you which method to use. Problems are no different, no harder, they're just mixed up. So instead of saying in this section you're going to use difference of squares, they just tell you you're going to have to factor, and they don't tell you which one is which. So your first task is to figure out which method to use. So we're going to look at number 1 first. So the first thing we always look for is what? GCF. Is there a GCF in number 1? B, okay, and? They do have a B in common, good, but something else. What? 7, good. Okay, and what are we left with if we factor a 7b out of 28a squared b? 4, good. A squared, because we did nothing with the a's. And what's 63 divided by 7? 9. Okay. So now we factored a GCF out. It's not focusing very well. And we're left with this. Now which type of factoring are we going to use from our reference sheet? So we did the GCF, step 1. Step 2 says what? What's this say? What type of polynomial is it? 2 terms, so it's a binomial. Good. Easy thing about 2 terms is there's only one way to factor if we have 2 terms. What is that way? Difference of squares, yeah, the square roots. Okay, so we need to make 2 parentheses. What are the signs in the parentheses? Good. One's plus, one's minus with difference of squares every time. Okay, so what's the first term? What's the square root of 4a squared? 2a, good. So if we take 2a and we multiply it by 2a, we get 4a squared, which is what we want. And what's the square root of 9? What was it? 3, good. So then you put 3 and 3 on the other side. Good. So this was a difference of squares at 2 terms. 8.
We're doing following section.
No. Now number 2. So what do we look for first? Yeah, GCF. Is there a GCF?
Yes.
Yes, what is it? 3. Good. So our trick with GCF is always try the smallest number. 3 is the smallest number, and it is the GCF. So we're going to take a 3 out. M squared. What's 9 divided by 3? 9 divided by 3. Negative 30 divided by 3. Negative 10. Good. Okay, so once we take the GCF out, we're left with this. So this is what we're looking with. How many terms? 3 terms, okay? So on our reference sheet, there's 2 different things we could have. Is there a number in front of our squared term on the problem? No. So this says, is there a positive 1 in front? If there's no number, then it's positive 1. So yes, we're going to use this way. And it has this right here, which is that shortcut trick we know. So we're allowed to make 2 parentheses with our squared term in the front. So we're going to bring the 3 down. We're going to make 2 parentheses. M squared is what's squared, so we're going to put M and M in the front of each. And then it says, what 2 numbers multiply to get the last number, add to get the middle number. So that's the technique we're using in this case. So we need 2 numbers that multiply to give us what? Negative 10, and add to give us 3. So since it has to multiply to a negative, what do we know about our signs? Good. One's negative, one's positive. If we have to multiply to a negative, we have to have 1 negative, 1 positive. I wrote 2 negatives. There we go. 1 negative, 1 positive. Okay? So what multiplies to give us negative 10 and adds to 3? Negative 2 and 5. Good. So if we take negative 2 times 5, you get negative 10. If you take negative 2, add 5, you get 3. So this is factored completely. Good. So GCF first, then how many terms? Okay, now let's look at number 3. 3 is another easier one. How many terms are there? 4. We only have one technique to factor if there's 4 terms. It's this one. Factor by grouping. So it says factor the GCF out of the first 2, factor the GCF out of the second 2. So we're going to group the first 2 terms together. Guys, stop talking. Take the GCF out of the first 2 terms. So x cubed and 2x squared y. What's the GCF? X squared. Good. So this term only has x's. It has 3 of them. This one has 2. We can take out the lowest exponent. So 2 is the lowest exponent. What are we left with if we take x squared out of x cubed? Just x. Good. And we took x squared out of 2x squared y, and we get 2y. Good. So that's the first group factored. Now we look at the second group. We want these to be the same. We've got negative 4x and negative 8y. What's the GCF? Negative 4. If we factor a negative 4 out of negative 4x, what are we left with? X. And a negative 4 out of negative 8y? Plus 2y. No, plus 2y. Because we factored a negative out. So now we see our parentheses are the same. So we take that as one of our parentheses, x plus 2y. And what's our second one going to be? X squared minus 4, good. What's left on the outside? So our 2 GCFs make up the second parenthesis, x squared minus 4, right here. So far we did a perfect square, or difference of squares. We did a trinomial with a 1 in front, and we've done a grouping. Now let's look at number 5. We're not doing number 4. Number 5 says 48w to the 5th minus 3w. First things first, is there a GCF? There is. He says 3. 3 is a part of the GCF. What else do these 2 terms have in common? W. Good. So we take both of those out. What's left after we factor a 3 out of 48? 16w what? To the 4th. Good. So we had 5 w's. We took out 1. So now we have 16w4. We had minus 3w. We factored 3w out. What's left? Minus 1. Good. Okay, so we've done step 1. We factored a GCF out. Now step 2 says what type of polynomial? How many terms do we have? 2 terms. So it's a binomial. There's only one way to factor 2 terms. Difference of squares. Yeah, difference of 2 squares. Is this a difference? Yes. And are these 2 numbers squares? Yes. So it's weird with 1, but 1 is a square. 1 times 1 is 1. So we're going to bring 3w down. We're going to set up 2 parentheses. What's the signs? Yep, 1's plus, 1's minus. Every time you do the difference of 2 squares, it's 1 plus, 1 minus. So the term that goes in the front is the square root of the first term. So what's the square root of 16? 4. Being careful here, what's the square root of w to the 4th? W squared, good. I didn't quite leave enough room. So you get 4w squared and 4w squared. It's kind of ugly. And what's the square root of 1? 1. So you get plus 1 minus 1. So 3w times 4w squared plus 1 times 4w squared minus 1. Good. So this is perfect squares again. Now let's look at number 7. So step 1 on our green sheet. Always factor out the GCF if there is one. Is there a GCF? It's 4. Good. So we always try the lowest number. 4 happens to be the lowest number and is the GCF. Do they share variables? Yes. How many can we factor out? This one has 4, this one has 3, this one has 2. X squared, good. So we factor out the lowest exponent on common variables. 4, 3, 2. 2 is the lowest. That's what we take out. What do we have left after we take a 4x squared out of this trinomial? 2x squared, good. Keep going. Minus x. Minus 6. Good. Okay. So we factor the GCF out. Now step 2. How many terms? 3. These are the things you should ask yourself on every problem. Is there a GCF? Now how many terms? There's 3. Is there a positive 1 in front of x squared, or is there not a positive 1 in front? There's not. There's a 2 in front. So that means we follow the second arrow path. We multiply the first and last numbers together. What are the first and last numbers? Good. What's that equal? Negative 12. And they have to add to what? Negative 1. So they have to multiply to a negative. What's that tell us about our signs? One's positive and one's negative. Good. So what numbers multiply to negative 12 add to negative 1? He says negative 4 and 3. You can try them on your calculator. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. So these are our two numbers that we're going to use. So we multiplied the first and the last. We did find two numbers that multiply and add. Third step says rewrite the polynomial. So what are we going to write now? 2x squared minus 4x plus 3x, good, minus 6. And then once we have 4 terms, we know that we can group. So we're going to group them and factor them. What's the GCF of 2x squared and minus 4x? Huh? 2x, good. What's left? X minus 2. Okay. And what's the GCF of 3x and minus 6? 3. And we get x minus 2 again. So we got what we wanted. Our parentheses are the same. So that's one of our parts of our answer. X minus 2. What's the other part? 2x plus 3. Okay, and what are we forgetting? The 4x squared. So we can't forget the GCF that we factored out originally. So it comes down. So this is our whole answer, all 3 of these things. So if you factor GCF out, you have to remember that GCF is part of your answer. It's easy to forget about it. Yeah.
Are we almost done? Is that really how you do that?
Yes, we got 3 more. Okay, we're going to go to the other side. We're going to do 15 and then 21 and 22. $15, 21, 22. Okay, number 15. First step is to do what? Every time. GCF. Good. Is there a GCF? Just x. Good. So this term is a 1, negative 10, 21. So 1 is what they share. We don't write it. But they do have a variable in common. This one's x cubed, x squared, x. So we take out the lowest exponent, which is just 1x. What are we left with? X squared minus 10x plus 21. Good. How many terms do we have now is the next step? 3. Is there a positive 1 in front or not? There is. So we're going to do the shortcut method on the left, this arrow. We can write 2 parentheses with the variable in the front. So bring down our GCF, and then we have 2 parentheses. Okay. Now it says, after that, multiply to get the last number, add to get the middle. So we need 2 numbers that multiply to give us 21, add to give us negative 10. He says negative 7 and negative 3. If we add them, we get negative 10. That's good. We multiply them, we get 21. That's good. So those are the 2 numbers that you put inside your parentheses. And this is done. So this is a trinomial without a coefficient in front. Good. 21. GCF or no? What? No, there is no GCF. Good. So we tried the lowest number is 3. 3 doesn't go into 5. So there's no numbers GCF. These two have a B, but these two don't. These 3 have an A. Sorry, I'm not down far enough. These 3 have an A, this one doesn't. These 2 have B's, these 2 don't. So they don't share any variables, and they don't have any numbers in common. So there is no GCF. So now we ask ourselves, how many terms? 4. We only have one way to factor 4 terms. It's right here on the right. If 4 terms, we're going to group. So we put parentheses around the first 2 and around the second 2. We take the GCF out of both sets. What's the GCF of 5a squared and 10ab? 5a, good. Try the lowest number, and they share a variable, 5a. What's left after we take 5a out of 5a squared? Good. And after we take 5a out of 10ab, plus 2 what? b. Good. So that's the first group factored. What's the GCF of the second group? -3, good. Make sure we get that negative sign, so that way the first term is now positive since it's positive in this parenthesis. So we want our parentheses to match, and they will match after we take a -3 out. So now our parentheses match. That's one of our parts of our answer. What's the second part? What's the second parenthesis? 5a minus 3. So the two GCFs combine to be the second parenthesis. So that's grouping. So there's no reason to miss any of these that have 2 terms or 4 terms. There's only one way to factor both of them. So there are no questions asked. If there's 2 terms, you use difference. If there's 4, you use factor by grouping. The only difficult one is when there's 3, you got to figure out which way to go. 22. Last one. Is there a GCF in 22? What is it? It is 3. What do we get when we factor 3 out of 75? 25. X squared. Guys, stop talking. What do we get when we factor 3 out of -30? And 3 out of 3? Plus 1. Okay, so we factor the GCF out. Now how many terms are there? 3 terms. Is there a positive 1 in front or not? No, there's a 25. So that means we use the second way. So we're going to multiply the first and last number. What's the first number? 25, and the last? 1. What's 25 times 1? 25. So we need a number that multiplies the 25 and adds to what? -10. Good, the middle number. So what 2 numbers multiply to 25 and add to -10? -5 and -5, good. So after we do that, step 3 says to rewrite the equation. So we take the original, and instead of writing minus 10x, we change it to minus 5x because that's our 2 numbers that we found. So we rewrite with the 2 numbers that we solved for. This is what we wanted. -5 times -5, 25. -5 plus -5, -10. Yeah. So now what do we do once we have 4 terms? Group it, yep. So there's only one way to factor with 4 terms. What's the GCF of the first? 5 and x. And what are we left with after we take 5x out? 5x minus 1. Guys, stop talking. Okay, so we want these two parentheses to be the same. What's different about them right now? Not much. Just the sign. So what can we take out of this to flip the signs? -1, good. So anytime you factor a -1, it flips the signs, which is what we want to happen. And now we have a parenthesis that's in common. This answer is going to look kind of good. So 5x minus 1, I'm not going to do that quite yet, is the one we have in common. And then the GCFs make up the second term. So what's the second term? It will be, yeah. So 5x minus 1 again, because they're going to end up being the same. And then what are we forgetting? 3, the GCF from the beginning. It's easy to forget about it. And then you can rewrite this if you want. You don't have to. Either way is right. As 5x minus 1 squared, since these are the same. So your homework is going to look exactly like this. You're going to have to figure it out on your own. Just like Wednesday's homework, but now they don't tell you which way to do it.
Shut your so bad.
Okay, you got about 20 minutes. Not as much time as usual, so use it.
Better be in your press. Better be able to get on we were all thinking about it. Say I want to go out. Let's go out real quick. Watch out. I think your camera's kind of messed up, man. I got an extra computer. Madison broke. How much? $50.
No, I can't speak for that. I can't speak for Springer.
I'm already on it.
Oh, you look, you look, and I look away. You look, and then you look away.
But
I mean, probably.
What do you want, dog?
Do you think you're under
The big guy so much.
Probably.
yes. You have to take.
Yeah.
Maybe you should.
I know, but he was that I was 9.
Trying to get you to stand up. And like, like you got the whole class. You see it, don't like her slave good. All that. Oh, bro, good.
They're both the same. This one just has calcium. So this one.
This one is we were talking, Thomas, he really talked about and then like Calvert started saying stuff and then I started saying stuff. And apparently I interrupted her and then she was like, okay, Thomas, what I was saying before, whatever. She gave me like a name. She's like, son, interrupted me. And like I was gonna like DM you and then I was gonna personally DM her and say, and then what time's what they asked my problem with me? And then I was like, what?
That drinks 5 in and
yeah, but I'm like at one point, so really I can't talk to that.
doesn't have it broken down into which one to use. You gotta figure out which one to use.
Like I wasn't just saying that, but I was gonna say, okay, this is a problem for you to do.
Check 8.
Because
So
otherwise,
smallest numbers.
you know, it was. I wasn't really good about it, I was just saying that you gotta talk to me. It's not broken.
As soon as you see it. And take the GCF out. How many terms?
I just got hauled on that. I just don't know that.
2X.
Can you have what? I didn't take your phone. I have no idea. Don't know anything about it. Oh, it's March now.
Alright, it's going so fast.
I know, I'm leaving 2 months.
You do?
Yep, 2 months. Well, 2 months from yesterday.
Dang.
I graduate 2 months from today.
Wait,
Can I go when he comes back?
Yes.
No, how's this route?
Can I go when she comes back?
There's time to go. How do you get out of here?
What time is it?
And if I do, then I'll let you know it has to turn in 4.
Adult bikes that take about like 30 minutes, but kind of.
Oh, yeah. But, he said that, you know, he's like, if I end up telling you, I'll let you know ahead of time so you can, you know, and stuff. So he just had told me, he said, I'll give it to you if you want it.
You don't have to. Comfortably, you come back over here.
He's a cool guy. I know he's not, so, you know, I thought we had this one.
Nope.